Have you ever thought about what it means to just vanish? To step out of your life and leave behind nothing but a chilling silence. Tonight, we're looking at what happens when the truth is so strange, it feels like a nightmare. We'll get to the story of a group of hikers whose last moments were so bizarre, investigators found their bodies scattered across a frozen mountainside, some without shoes in sub-zero temperatures. Welcome back to the channel, where we explore the world's darkest and most unsettling mysteries. I'm Echoes, the voice in the darkness. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, and if you're into eerie, vanished cases and mysteries that still defy explanation, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to join us. Tonight, we're uncovering 10 of the creepiest true mysteries on Earth cases where the real story is still missing, and the silence left behind is terrifying. These are the stories of people who disappeared, leaving only dread and unanswered questions. Now light your lanterns, slow your breathing, and let's drift into the hush of the night. Section 1. The Beaumont Children. Our first story takes us to what should have been a safe place, a sun-drenched Australian beach on a summer day. But on Australia Day, January 26, 1966, that perfect scene became the backdrop for one of the nation's most haunting mysteries. This is the story of the Beaumont Children, 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Arna, and 4-year-old Grant. It was a hot day in Adelaide, and the three siblings took a short, familiar bus trip to Glenelg Beach. Jane, the oldest, was responsible, and her parents, Jim and Nancy, trusted her to look after the younger two. They were supposed to be home for lunch around 2 p.m., but the 2 p.m. bus came and went. So did the next one. As the afternoon wore on, a knot of worry tightened into full-blown panic. The Beaumonts reported their children missing. What followed was one of the largest police investigations in Australian history. Police and volunteers scoured the beach and surrounding areas, but they found nothing. No towels, no bags, no clothes. The country was gripped by the story, their faces etched into the national memory. As police pieced together witness statements, a disturbing picture started to form. Several people reported seeing the kids on the beach with a tall, thin-faced, athletic-looking man with blondish hair. The children seemed relaxed with him and playing. This was unnerving. It suggested they either knew him or he had a charm that put them completely at ease. Even more troubling, a shop owner remembered the children buying snacks with a £1 note, money their mother was certain she hadn't given them. This implied the mystery man had given it to them, a classic grooming tactic. The last credible sighting placed the children walking away from the beach around 12:30 p.m. in the general direction of home. They never arrived. Over the years, the case was poisoned by cruel hoaxes. 2 years after they vanished, the Beaumonts received letters, supposedly from Jane, claiming they were being held by a man. A meeting was arranged for their return, but no one showed. It was later exposed as a twisted prank by a teenager. Decades later, many have been considered persons of interest. One was a wealthy local businessman, Harry Phipps, who resembled the sketch of the man on the beach. Years later, 2 men claimed Phipps had paid them to dig a large hole at a factory site he owned just after the children disappeared. That site was excavated in 2018, but sadly, no remains were found. The disappearance of the Beaumont children forever changed Australia, marking what many saw as the end of an innocent era. Jim and Nancy Beaumont eventually divorced, their lives broken by the endless mystery. Both passed away without ever knowing what happened to their 3 children, who went to the beach one summer day and never came home. For nearly 60 years, the case has remained cold, a painful open wound in Australia's history. Section 2. The Sodder Children. On Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia, The Sodder family was settling in for the night. George and Jenny Sodder, Italian immigrants, had 10 children, 9 of whom were home. As the house went quiet, nobody could imagine that by morning, their family would be shattered and 5 of their children would be gone, sparking a mystery that would haunt them forever. The night started strangely. Around 12:30 a.m. on Christmas morning, the phone rang. A woman on the line asked for a name Jenny didn't know, laughed weirdly, and hung up. Jenny noticed the lights were on and the front door was unlocked. She went back to bed, but was woken again around 1 a.m. by a thud on the roof. Half an hour later, she woke to the smell of smoke. The house was on fire. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children, John, George Jr., Marion, and 2-year-old Sylvia, scrambled to escape. But 5 children were still trapped upstairs: Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. Panic set in. The ladder George always kept against the house was gone. It was later found tossed in an embankment 75 feet away. He tried to drive his work trucks to the house to climb on them, but neither would start, despite working perfectly the day before. The phone line was dead. A neighbor had to run to a tavern to call for help. By the time the fire department, delayed by the holiday, arrived, the home was a pile of smoldering ash. The official conclusion was that the 5 children died in the fire, which was caused by faulty wiring. But the Sodders didn't buy it. Jenny, a practical woman, knew that animal bones often survived house fires and couldn't understand how the fire could have completely destroyed 5 children's remains. Their grief was soon replaced by a chilling suspicion. The fire was arson, and their children had been kidnapped. The family's doubts grew. A repairman confirmed their phone line appeared to have been cut, not burned. A bus driver claimed he saw people throwing balls of fire at the house late that night. In the spring, Sylvia found a hard, dark green rubber object in the yard, possibly a type of fire starter. The Sodders put up a billboard with the children's faces, offering a $10,000 reward. It became a local landmark, a symbol of a family's refusal to give up hope. Over the years, tips trickled in, including a claim from a hotel owner who said she saw the children with 2 men and 2 women of Italian descent a week after the fire. In 1949, an excavation at the site uncovered a few bone fragments, but a report from the Smithsonian Institution stated they were lumbar vertebrae from a male likely between 16 and 22 years old, older than the eldest missing Sodder child, 14-year-old Maurice. The report also noted the bones showed no signs of being in a fire, deepening the mystery. One of the most bizarre and cruel rumors in the case involved the local fire chief, who was said to have confessed years later to burying a beef liver in the ashes to make the family think they'd found a remnant, hoping they'd end their search. This claim, however, has never been verified. Then, in 1968, a strange envelope arrived. Inside was a photo of a young man in his late 20s who looked remarkably like their son Louis. On the back was a cryptic message: "Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. Ill boys. A 901, 32, or 35. The family hired a private detective to look into it, but he vanished after taking their money. George and Jenny Sodder died believing their children were out there somewhere. The case remains officially unsolved. Were they victims of a tragic accident, or were they stolen away under the cover of a fire? The questions linger, cold and unanswered. Section 3. The Mary Celeste. This next story is the stuff of legend, the ultimate ghost ship. It's the tale of a vessel found sailing perfectly in the middle of the Atlantic, with no one on board. This is the enduring, unnerving mystery of the Mary Celeste. On November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York, bound for Genoa, Italy. On board was its respected captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7. The ship's cargo was over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. Nearly a month later, on December 4th, the British ship De Gratia spotted the Mary Celeste adrift east of the Azores. It was sailing erratically. After hailing the ship and getting no response, a boarding party went to investigate. What they found was a ghost ship. The ship was eerily silent. No one was there. Yet the vessel was in good shape. The crew's belongings, money, and valuables were all untouched. There were ample provisions of food and fresh water. There were no signs of violence. The last entry in the ship's log was dated November 25th, 10 days earlier, and gave no hint of trouble. However, the captain's navigational tools and the ship's only lifeboat were missing. It seemed that, for some reason, all 10 people had abandoned a perfectly sound ship for a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. But why? The public's imagination ran wild. Pirates? But nothing was stolen. Mutiny? But there was no sign of a struggle. Theories ranged from sea monsters to alien abduction. Over the years, more logical theories have emerged. A popular one centers on the cargo. It's possible that some of the 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol leaked, filling the hold with flammable vapor. This has led to the vapor explosion theory. The idea is that a spark could have ignited the fumes, causing a terrifying but brief blast of flame that didn't do major damage, but blew open the cargo hatches. This could have convinced Captain Briggs that a catastrophic explosion was imminent. Modern experiments have shown that such a blast is possible and could happen without leaving scorch marks, which would explain the lack of fire evidence. In that scenario, a panicked Captain Briggs, thinking of his wife and child, would have made the cautious call to temporarily abandon ship. He might have had everyone get into the lifeboat, tethering it to the Mary Celeste to wait from a safe distance. If that rope then snapped, the much faster sailing ship would have pulled away, leaving them stranded and hopeless. This is just a theory, but it offers a plausible explanation. Whatever the truth, the 10 souls from the Mary Celeste were never seen again. They vanished into the cold Atlantic, leaving behind an empty ship and a mystery that has haunted the seas for over 150 years. Section 4. The Hinterkaifeck Murders. Some places just feel wrong, holding a darkness that lingers long before tragedy hits. Hinterkaifeck was one of those places. It wasn't a town, just an isolated farmstead in Bavaria, Germany, home to the Gruber family. In the winter of 1922, this remote farm became the scene of one of Germany's most brutal and baffling unsolved crimes. The farm housed Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her 2 children, Cecilia and Joseph. A new maid, Maria Baumgartner, had also just arrived. The family was known for being reclusive and wasn't well liked. In the days leading up to the murders, strange things happened. Andreas told neighbors he'd found footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the house, but none leading away. He heard footsteps in the attic, but found no one. A set of house keys went missing. An unfamiliar newspaper appeared. The previous maid had quit months earlier, claiming the house was haunted. On March 31st, 1922, the new maid, Maria, arrived. It was her first and last day. Days passed. The younger Cecilia missed school. The family missed church. Finally, on April 4th, a group of neighbors went to check on them. What they found was a nightmare. In the barn lay the bodies of Andreas, his wife, their daughter Victoria, and the young Cecilia. They had been brutally murdered. Inside the house, they found 2-year-old Josef in his cot, and the new maid, Maria, in her room, both also killed. All 6 victims had been struck down with a mattock, a type of pickaxe. The crime scene was bizarre. The bodies in the barn had been covered with hay. The The young Celia clutched handfuls of her own hair. But the most disturbing detail is what the evidence suggests happened after the murders. The killer, or killers, may have stayed at the farm for several days. Neighbors had seen smoke from the chimney over the weekend. The cattle had been fed, and someone had eaten food from the kitchen. It was as if the killer had calmly carried on the daily chores while the family lay dead. This transforms the case from a simple murder into something profoundly sinister. The investigation was a mess. Over 100 suspects were questioned, but no one was ever charged. Robbery was ruled out when a large sum of cash was found in the house. The farmhouse was demolished a year later, destroying the crime scene. In a sign of desperation, the victims' heads were at one point sent to be examined by clairvoyants. Decades later, in 2007, German Police Academy students re-examined the case files and reportedly identified a likely suspect who was long dead. But his name was never released to the public out of respect for living relatives. More than a century later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain officially unsolved. Who walked out of those woods? Who wielded the mattock with such brutality? And who had the chilling audacity to live amongst the dead before melting back into the shadows? Section 5. Lars Mittank. The story of Lars Mittank is a modern mystery caught on camera. Yet it's as baffling as any ancient legend. Known as the most famous missing person on YouTube, his disappearance is a terrifying spiral into paranoia, ending with a single, inexplicable act. In the summer of 2014, 28-year-old Lars Mittank was on vacation with friends in Golden Sands, Bulgaria. The trip took a dark turn when Lars got into a fight with other tourists over rival soccer teams. He ended up with a ruptured eardrum. A doctor told him he couldn't fly home with his friends because of the injury. He was prescribed an antibiotic, cefuroxime 500, and decided to stay behind. His friends offered to wait, but he insisted they go. He checked into a cheap hotel near the Varna airport. It was during this time alone that his behavior became deeply strange. He started calling his mother in Germany, his voice getting more and more frantic. He whispered, claiming 4 men were following him, wanting to rob or kill him. He told her to cancel his credit cards. Hotel security cameras showed him pacing, looking out windows, and hiding in the elevator. His paranoia seemed to be escalating fast. Was he really in danger? Or was he having a sudden psychotic break, maybe triggered by the head injury or a rare side effect of his medication? On July 8, 2014, Lars went to the airport to fly home. He texted his mother that he'd made it. He just needed final clearance from the airport doctor. He went into the doctor's office, leaving his luggage outside. This is where the last known moments of his life were caught on camera. The airport security footage shows Lars sitting in the doctor's office. According to the doctor, he was nervous. Then, a man in a construction uniform entered the office, a normal thing in an airport under renovation. At the sight of this man, Lars completely panicked. He reportedly muttered, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." He jumped up and bolted. The footage shows him sprinting out of the office, leaving his wallet, passport, phone, and all his bags behind. He runs through the terminal at full speed, a look of pure terror on his face. He runs out the main entrance, across the parking lot, and scales an 8-foot-high barbed wire fence. He lands on the other side in a huge field of sunflowers and disappears. He was never seen again. Searches of the area turned up nothing. Did he suffer a delusion and die from exposure in the wilderness? Was he really being chased by criminals who finally caught up with him? The video is what makes this so haunting. We see the terror, we see the flight, but we don't see what he was running from. Was it a real threat or a phantom in his own mind? The human mind hates a vacuum, and these stories are full of them. If these mysteries are grabbing you, do us a huge favor and hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us keep exploring these dark corners of the world. Now, let's get back into the unknown. Section 6. Brian Shaffer. The disappearance of Brian Shaffer seems to defy logic. It's a case built around one impossible fact. A man walks into a bar and never walks out. He was caught on camera going in, but no camera ever saw him leave. Brian Shaffer was a 27-year-old medical student at Ohio State. On the night of March 31st, 2006, he went out for a night of bar hopping with his friend William Clint Florence. Their last stop was the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar on the second floor of a building in Columbus, Ohio. At about 1:15 a.m., security cameras caught Brian, Clint, and another friend, Meredith Reed, taking the escalator up to the bar. The footage is clear. Around 1:55 a.m., Brian is seen on camera one last time, just outside the bar's entrance. He briefly talks with two women, then turns and walks back into the bar. That is the last confirmed sighting of Brian Shaffer. At 2 a.m., the bar closed. Clint and Meredith waited for Brian, but he never showed up. They tried calling his phone, but it went to voicemail. Assuming he'd just walked home, they left. He wasn't at his apartment. On Monday morning, when Brian missed a flight for a planned vacation with his girlfriend, he was reported missing. The police investigation zeroed in on the Ugly Tuna Saloona. The building's only public entrance and exit was the escalator where Brian was last seen. Investigators watched every second of the security footage. They saw every other person who entered the bar leave. They never saw Brian. So how could he have gotten out? The buildings did have a service exit, but cameras covering that area also showed no sign of him. Could he have changed his clothes and left in disguise? Did he meet with foul play inside the bar? Everyone there that night was eventually questioned. No one reported any fights or arguments involving Brian. The entire bar was searched. He wasn't there. His friend Clint Florence refused to take a polygraph test, which raised eyebrows, but police have said they don't believe he was involved. For months after he vanished, Brian's girlfriend called his phone every day. For a while, it would ring 3 times before going to voicemail, which gave her hope he was alive and turning it on briefly. Those pings were traced to a cell tower in a suburb of Columbus, but the area was too large to effectively search. Tragically, in 2008, Brian's father, Randy, who had dedicated his life to the search, was killed in a freak accident. As recently as early 2026, podcasters investigating the case reported receiving a compelling new tip, reigniting interest in the nearly 2-decade-old mystery. Brian Shaffer walked into a bar and stepped into a void. Did he find a security blind spot and walk away to start a new life? Or did he encounter someone in that crowded bar that led to his silent, unseen end? Section 7. Jimmy Hoffa. Some disappearances are mysterious because the victim is an ordinary person. This one is mysterious because the victim was anything but. Jimmy Hoffa was one of the most powerful and controversial men in 20th century America. As president of the Teamsters Union, he was a hero to his members, but also had widely alleged ties to organized crime. On July 30th, 1975, those ties likely caught up with him. Hoffa had recently been released from prison and was determined to reclaim his presidency of the Teamsters. This put him in direct conflict with the new leadership and powerful mafia figures who preferred things the way they were. On that afternoon, Hoffa drove to the Matches Red Fox restaurant in a Detroit suburb. He was apparently there for a peacemaking meeting with 2 mob bosses, Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone of Detroit and Anthony Tony Pro Provenzano, a Teamsters official with the Genovese crime family. Hoffa arrived around 2 p.m. He waited. The men never showed. At 2:30, he called his wife from a payphone, telling her he'd been stood up. Around 3:30 p.m., he was seen looking frustrated in the parking lot. After that, Jimmy Hoffa was gone. His car was found unlocked in the parking lot the next morning. No sign of a struggle, no blood. The FBI was called in, and one of the most famous missing person investigations in American history began. The leading theory has always been that Hoffa was lured to the restaurant, abducted, and murdered by the mob to stop him from regaining control of the Teamsters and its massive pension fund. The list of suspects reads like a who's who of organized crime. Over the decades, the search for Hoffa's body has become a modern myth. The most famous rumor, that he was buried in Giants Stadium, was debunked when the stadium was demolished in 2010. Other tip-offs have led investigators to search horse farms, suburban driveways, and landfills, all with no result. The prevailing theory among experts is that his body was disposed of in a way that would ensure it was never found, likely cremated in a mob-controlled incinerator or crushed in a car at a scrapyard. One of the most famous claims came from mob hitman Frank the Irishman Sheeran, who said he personally killed Hoffa, but DNA evidence found at the house he described did not match Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa was declared legally dead in 1982. There isn't much mystery about why he vanished. He was a powerful man who made powerful enemies. The real mystery, the one that endures, is the where. The answer is locked away in the Mafia's code of silence, buried so deep that it has never been found. Section 8. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. It feels impossible, doesn't it? That a 300-ton Boeing 777 carrying 239 people could just disappear from the face of the Earth. Yet, on March 8, 2014, that's exactly what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, bound for Beijing, China. About 40 minutes into the flight, as it was passing from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace, the cockpit made its last radio call. Good night, Malaysian 370. Minutes later, the plane's transponder, which communicates with air traffic control, was switched off. The plane vanished from civilian radar, but military radar tracked it. Instead of continuing to Beijing, the plane made a sharp, deliberate turn back across the Malay Peninsula, then turned again before flying out of radar range. And then, it was gone. Or so it seemed. For 7 more hours, a satellite communication system on the plane continued to send out hourly automated pings to a satellite. These pings didn't give a location, but by analyzing them, experts could determine the plane's distance from the satellite, creating huge arcs on a map. The final ping suggested the plane flew south, deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean, until it ran out of fuel and crashed. The 2018 final report from the Malaysian government concluded that the flight path was changed manually, but stressed it could not determine who was responsible or why. Over the years, more than 20 pieces of debris confirmed or thought to be from MH370 have washed up on the coasts of Africa, confirming the plane went down in the Indian Ocean. The private company, Ocean Infinity, has conducted massive deep-sea searches. A search that began in late 2025 ended in January 2026 without success. However, in June 2026, the Malaysian government extended its no-find, no-fee contract with Ocean Infinity for another year, renewing hope that the main wreckage might one day be found. What happened in that cockpit? Theories center on a mass murder-suicide by one of the pilots. Others suggest a catastrophic fire that incapacitated the crew, or a hijacking gone wrong. Without the flight recorders from the main wreckage, we may never know. The 239 people on board remain missing, their fate a terrifying testament to the fact that even in our hyper-connected world, there are still empty spaces where a plane full of people can vanish forever. Section 9. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. In Russia's Ural Mountains, there's a place the local Mansi people call Kholat Syakhl, or Dead Mountain. In February 1959, it lived up to its name. A group of 9 experienced hikers, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, set up their final camp on the mountain's slope. It was an exposed, dangerous spot, but for some reason, they camped there. Then, something went horribly wrong. When the group didn't return, a search party was sent. On February 26th, they found the tent. It was badly damaged and had been cut open from the inside. All the group's heavy winter gear, coats, boots, was still inside. The hikers had fled in a panic, running into sub-zero temperatures without proper clothing. Footprints showed some were barefoot, some wore only socks. The first 2 bodies were found near a forest's edge, almost a mile from the tent, by the remains of a small fire. They were dressed only in their underwear. 3 more bodies were found between the fire and the tent, in positions that suggested they were trying to get back. It took 2 more months to find the last 4 hikers, buried in a ravine under 10 feet of snow. They had suffered horrific injuries. One had a major skull fracture. 2 others had catastrophic chest fractures, the kind of damage seen in a high-speed car crash. But strangely, their bodies had no external signs of trauma, like bruises. Most gruesomely, one of them, Lyudmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue and eyes. Investigators at the time suggested this was likely due to natural decomposition and scavenging in the wet environment of the ravine. The official Soviet investigation vaguely concluded they died from a compelling unknown natural force. Traces of radiation on some of their clothes fueled theories of secret weapons tests or UFOs for decades. In recent years, a more scientific theory has gained traction: a slab avalanche. This is where a large plate of snow slides down. A small one could have hit the tent, causing panic and some of the internal injuries without burying them. Fearing a larger avalanche, the hikers would have cut their way out. Disoriented and freezing, they would have quickly succumbed to hypothermia, which can cause paradoxical undressing, a bizarre symptom where victims feel hot and remove their clothes. Still, even this theory doesn't perfectly explain the severe, localized internal injuries of the last 4 victims. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains a chilling puzzle, a story of 9 adventurers driven from their shelter by an unknown terror to meet a brutal, inexplicable end on the slopes of Dead Mountain. Section 10. The Franklin Expedition. We end with a descent into a frozen hell. It's a tale of ambition, ice, and a slow, agonizing slide into madness and cannibalism. This is the nightmare of Sir John Franklin's lost expedition. In 1845, 2 advanced British naval ships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, set sail with 129 men. Their mission: to conquer the fabled Northwest Passage through the Canadian Arctic. They had the latest technology and a 3-year supply of canned food. They were last seen by whalers in July 1845. Then, silence. Years later, the first grim clues emerged. An explorer met local Inuit hunters who told a horrifying story. They had encountered a group of starving white men dragging a boat south. Later, they found their bodies. The hunters presented relics that confirmed their identity. They also told of something that shocked Victorian England. From the mutilated state of the corpses, it was clear the men had resorted to cannibalism. In 1859, a note was found on King William Island. It confirmed the ships had been trapped in ice since 1846. It recorded Sir John Franklin's death in June 1847. A later entry noted that the 105 survivors had abandoned the ships in April 1848 to attempt a desperate march to the Canadian mainland. What followed was a slow-motion catastrophe. Modern analysis of remains found scattered across the island paints a terrifying picture. The men suffered from scurvy. They were also suffering from severe lead poisoning. The canned food that was supposed to save them was likely their undoing. Evidence suggests the tins were shoddily soldered, leaching lead into their food and contributing to illness and paranoia. The most horrific evidence is on the bones themselves. Many remains show clear cut marks from knives and signs of being broken to get to the marrow. This wasn't a single act, but likely a prolonged, systematic part of their attempt to survive. For over 150 years, the ship's resting places were a mystery. Then, in 2014, the wreck of the HMS Erebus was found, followed by the HMS Terror in 2016. As of May 2026, DNA analysis has started to put names to the dead, successfully identifying a few of the crew members from remains by matching their DNA to that of living descendants. The Franklin expedition is pure nightmare fuel because it's a story of slow, inevitable doom. It's 129 men, the best of the British Navy, trapped in a frozen world, their bodies poisoned by their own food, their minds unraveling, forced to commit the ultimate taboo to survive just one more day, only to be consumed by the ice. From a sunny beach to the frozen Arctic, these stories all share a common thread: the terrifying silence of the unexplained. The people in these tales didn't just die, they were erased, leaving vacuums of information filled with fear and speculation. In these cases, the truth remains a ghost. Which of these stories gets under your skin the most? Are there any other unsolved disappearances you want us to investigate? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the dark. Now, blow out your lanterns. We shall meet again.